All right. Today I'm going to be going over the statement of eligibility for the orthopedic impairment. This little guy right here. This is the eligibility statement for ECSE, that early childhood special education and school age, which is the ages of 5 through 21. And we'll see that as we go through this form. So again, at the top of this form, we have the student's information, student name, date of birth, SSID for the district that they're in, school district, school, and grade level. So for this evaluation, this is a comprehensive evaluation. So if a student is suspected of having an orthopedic impairment, a comprehensive evaluation must be conducted for early childhood or school-age special education services, including the following. And so again, this is attaching all the evaluation reports that describes and explains the results of the evaluation conducted. So the first one is that the team has reviewed existing information. So this would be like a file review, including information from the parents, previous testing, medical data, the student's cumulative records and previous individualized education programs, or individualized family service plans. Evaluation documentation includes relevant information from these sources. So kind of this would be that file review, and then the date reviewed would be inputted here. For the date reviewed, normally that would be the date of the meeting that you're having and going over this eligibility form. Number two is the documentation of a medical examination as defined by the OAR 581-015-2000, indicating a diagnosis of an orthopedic or neuromotor impairment or a description of a motor impairment. So again, we need that documentation and that medical examination and a diagnosis of that orthopedic or neuromotor impairment or a description of the motor impairment. So then you just put the name of the physician or whoever conducted that evaluation and examination, the date that it was conducted, and then the date reviewed again. All the date reviewed would be the same date as we go down this list. For number three, a standardized motor assessment, including the areas of fine motor, gross motor, and self-help, when appropriate by a specialist knowledgeable about orthopedic or neuromotor development. So this would be the assessment that would be done probably by the occupational therapist or the OT team, and they would go ahead and do their evaluation as well for the student and be able to put their information within this part here as well. Number four is any additional assessments that may determine the impact or of the suspected disability on the student's developmental progress for the student age 3 to 5 for that ECSE, or for the student's educational performance for students aged to 5 to 21, and that would be the special education piece. So as we go down here, so if this student, they were noticing that there were some other evaluations that they wanted to do, especially if there was academics that were also of a concern, they might do a Wyatt, or they might do a Woodcock-Johnson, or the KTA, and so all of those evaluations would be put in that other additional assessment pieces. So that piece right here, that four, would be determine the impact of the suspected disability. So evaluations to help with the suspected disability. And then number five is any additional evaluations necessary to identify the student's developmental or educational needs. So if your school psychologist wants to do some COG testing or anything like that, especially if they're suspecting maybe another disability, a bunch of those evaluations could also be put into this section here. So once all of those evaluations have been done, we can go down here to the eligibility criteria. So in order to have an orthopedic impairment, a student must have a motor disability that adversely affects the student's development or the student's educational performance. Again, this is the big one. So we've had students that have orthopedic impairments, but they're on 504 plans and not special education plans. Because remember, even if they have something that's inhibiting their movement, they're wheelchair bound, they have, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, muscular dystrophy, or a traumatic injury, they have to have something that is continuing to, have an impact on their educational performance or their development. And so that would be a huge, huge piece. So as we go through here, the student has a motor impairment that results in deficits in the quality, speed, or accuracy of movement. These deficits are documented by a score of 2 or more standard deviations below the mean in fine motor, gross motor, and self-help. So again, that OT report and evaluation would be able to let you know if that's a yes or a no. So you just mark that based off of that information from your OT. The student has functional deficits in at least 2 or 3 different motor area. Yep. and the student's condition is permanent or is expected to last for more than 60 calendar school days. So all of these talk about the eligibility criteria. So if the student has been, found eligible, we would check yes, yes, yes. These are going to last more than 60 calendar days. And then the eligibility determinations. So the team has determined that the disability has an adverse impact on the child's developmental progress when the child is age 3 to 5, or has an adverse impact on the child's educational performance when the child is aged. So again, this is the piece that really trips people up. You can have a disability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you get special education services. So it's really important that when they are going through this eligibility determination, that the disability has an impact on the child's educational performance when the child is age 5 through 21, or 3 to 5 if they're looking at eligibility for ECSE. If that's the case, so like if we said yes, this is because of that, we can check yes. Then the student has an orthopedic impairment as defined in this rule, so we would say yes. And then by reason thereof, the student requires early childhood special education or school age special education services. And so that way we would click yes, and then the team considers, and then we can go down here. Now, if there's no impact on the educational performance, which tends to be the case with OI, then we would select no, and then the student would have an ortho impairment defined this by this rule, so they would say no, and they would not be getting, and so they would say no here as well. I hope that makes sense. And then for eligibility determinations, again, this one is going to be a big one that's seen on every single eligibility form, is a lack of appropriate instruction in reading. So lack of instruction. So did they have a lack of instruction? Yes or no? A lack of an appropriate instruction in math? Yes or no? And then limited English proficiency? Yes or no? And then down here we have the team agrees that this student does qualify. So this top section here would be for the early childhood special education. So that would be that age 3 to 5. And then this bottom section down here is special education services. So that's for 5 through 21. So normally if you're in the school setting, this would be the bottom section here. And so depending on what the team decides for these eligibility determinations, again, looking at that educational performance issue, that will determine whether or not they do qualify or they do not qualify. If the student is a early child education student, you would select this section does not apply to this student, and vice versa. So if the student is early childhood, you would say that this section does not apply to the student, and if the student's special education down here and you're doing these qualifications, then you say this section does not apply for this student. As we scroll down here, then you get signatures of everyone that's at the meeting. Everyone. All the people that are at the meeting have to sign this. And then making sure that a copy of all the evaluation reports and the eligibility statement have been provided to the parents or the guardian who is in charge of educational decisions. As we go down through this, again, this is the link to the one that's on the website. It has all of the OARs and all the information for the directions of use as well. So if you have any questions, there's those answers as well. Perfect. And that is it, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, or if you have more specific questions after watching this video, again, you can ask Janelle as well. She is also informed. So thank you.